At 6:02 in the morning, the first alarm screamed from under Mara's pillow like a tiny animal being strangled, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I did absolutely nothing. I lay on my side in the lower bunk, eyes open, cheek pressed against my cool pillowcase, watching a thin blue line of dawn cut across the ceiling of dormitory 6B. The alarm vibrated again, then died in a miserable little buzz because Mara always set her phone to auto snooze and always trusted someone else to care more about her future than she did. In my last life, I had thrown off my blanket at that sound, scrambled barefoot across the freezing tiles, shaken her shoulder, begged her to wake up, and then moved to Celia's bed, then Nika's, then back to Mara again because finals day was not a morning you risked. I had packed their pens, printed their admission slips, lent them my lucky calculator, shared my condensed notes, and practically dragged all three of them across campus while they complained about coffee. I had saved them. That was the part people forgot later. That was the part they buried under jokes, rumors, and fake tears. Because by noon that same day in my last life, Mara walked out of the artificial intelligence ethics final with my handwritten case framework memorized. Celia submitted the recommendation portfolio I had edited for her until 2 in the morning, and Nika smiled through her interview using my examples, my project, my voice. By evening, they were called the Miracle Room, 3 average girls who rose together at the perfect time. By graduation, they were standing on stage with faculty recommendations, research placements, and a school-sponsored transfer package I had once been promised. I was in the audience with a failing participation score, a plagiarism accusation, and a dean who told me gently that sometimes brilliant girls burned out because they could not collaborate. By the time I died at 22, sick from overwork, blacklisted from the recommendation system, and still unable to prove they had taken everything from me, I understood one truth with the clarity of a blade sliding between ribs. Saving lazy people does not make them grateful. It teaches them the exact weight of your spine so they know where to climb. At 6:05, Celia's alarm started under a pile of laundry, a soft harp tone she had chosen because she said aggressive alarms damaged feminine energy. It played for 20 seconds, floated through the room like a joke, then disappeared. Celia did not move. Her arm hung off the mattress, fingers curled, bracelet glittering in the weak light. In my last life, I had lifted that same arm and tucked it back under the blanket while whispering, "Celia, please, it's finals day," because I thought kindness meant noticing when someone else was about to ruin themselves. That was before I learned that people who rely on your kindness will later call it control. She had told the appeal committee I was obsessive, that I forced my notes on everyone, that I hovered over them because I could not stand other girls succeeding without me. She even cried when she said it. One perfect tear down her cheek, head lowered, voice shaking at just the right angle. I admired Elise so much, she told them, but she became scary near finals. She would wake us, check our bags, tell us what to study, and then when we scored well, she said we owed her. Mara squeezed her hand. Nika looked away, as if the memory was painful. I had sat across from them with my mouth open, holding a folder of printed drafts and timestamps that no one wanted to inspect because 3 soft girls with clean uniforms and trembling voices looked more believable than one exhausted scholarship student with dark circles and a reputation for being intense. The committee decided there had been unhealthy academic dependence in our room. My recommendation was delayed. Their recommendations were confirmed. I remember walking back to the dorm that night, hearing laughter through the door before I opened it, then silence when I stepped inside. Mara was the first to speak. "Don't look at us like that, Elise. You did this to yourself." I did not understand then. I understood now. At 6:08, Nika's smartwatch flashed on the desk instead of her wrist. It pulsed silently with a tiny red light, exactly where she had left it after saying, "Elise, remind me to wear this tomorrow, okay? I'm useless in the morning." In my last life, I had reminded her. In this life, I watched the red light blink against the corner of her untouched admission slip. She had not signed it. I knew because last night, she shoved it toward me while painting her nails and said, "You're awake anyway. Can you check if I filled this right?" I had smiled and said, "Sure, leave it there." And then I did not touch it. Not because I was cruel. Cruelty would have been hiding it. Cruelty would have been deleting alarms, locking doors, pouring water over notes, stealing ID cards, doing even a fraction of what they did to me in my first life. I did none of that. I changed nothing except my own behavior. I studied my own material. I packed my own bag. I set my own alarms on 2 devices and put them under my pillow. I slept with my student ID in the pocket of my hoodie, because in my first life Mara had borrowed it as a joke and returned it 10 minutes before we left, laughing while I nearly cried. This time, I gave no lecture. I issued no reminder. I performed no unpaid motherhood for girls who called me sister when they needed me and psycho when they no longer did. That was the strangest thing about Rebirth. I did not wake up wanting revenge first. I woke up tired. Tired all the way through my bones, tired of rescuing people from consequences and then being blamed for the shape of their footprints on my back. So when Nika rolled over and muttered something into her blanket, when Mara smacked her phone once without opening her eyes, when Celia sighed dramatically as if the morning itself had offended her, I pulled my blanket up to my chin and let silence do what I never had permission to do. The second life began 3 weeks earlier, at 11:47 at night, with my face pressed against a bathroom sink and blood in my mouth from biting my tongue during a panic attack I had already survived once. I remembered the cracked tile under my knees before I opened my eyes. I remembered the faulty light buzzing overhead. I remembered Celia's silk hair ribbon hanging from the shower hook, Mara's protein shaker in the sink, Nika's wet towel on my laundry basket, and the calendar on the wall with a red circle around finals day. For a moment, I thought death had a sense of humor. Then my phone lit up with a message from Mara. Elias, you awake? Can you fix my intro? My AI ethics essay sounds ugly. The timestamp was 3 weeks before the final exam. 3 weeks before they would pass because of me. 3 weeks before they would turn around and say I manipulated them. My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone. In my first life, I answered within 12 seconds. I still remembered the exact sentence I wrote. Send it, I'll clean it up. That sentence cost me 82 hours for missed meals, 2 research meetings, 1 scholarship interview prep session, and eventually my name. In this life, I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Another message came. Don't ignore me. You're literally the only one who understands Professor Han's rubric. Then Celia wrote in the room chat. Same, can you check mine after? Love you forever. Nika added a crying sticker. I sat on the bathroom floor and laughed so hard I scared myself. It was not a pretty laugh. It sounded like something breaking out of a locked room. Then I typed, sorry, I'm behind on my own work. I can't edit anyone's essay this term. I sent it before courage could drain out of my fingers. The room chat went silent. 5 minutes later, through the bathroom door, I heard Mara say, what is wrong with her? And Celia reply, soft as poison. Maybe she finally thinks she's better than us. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same pale face. Same long black hair tangled around my shoulders. Same scholarship hoodie faded at the cuffs. Same girl everyone thought could be guilt into anything. Except my eyes were different. They looked back at me with the cold patience of someone who had already attended her own funeral and found the guest list educational. From that night on, I became a ghost in my own dorm, but not the helpless kind that haunts hallways and rattles windows. I became the kind that watches. I watched Mara discover how little of her confidence survived without my outlines. She was loud in public, dramatic in private, and lazy in both. She loved saying she performed well under pressure, which in practice meant she waited until someone else panicked first, and then absorbed their labor, like sunlight. The first time I refused to rewrite her essay, she called her boyfriend and complained I was weaponizing competence. The second time, she copied old lecture slides into a document and asked the course forum whether citations were necessary if the facts were common knowledge. Professor Han replied publicly with a link to the academic integrity policy. Mara said he had no sense of humor. Celia was more dangerous because she understood aesthetics. Her desk looked like a productivity advertisement. Pastel tabs, scented highlighters, a tiny hourglass, study candles she never lit because smoke triggered her allergies. She posted photos captioned finals grind while I could see the blank notebook just outside the frame. She did not want to know things. She wanted to look like the kind of girl knowledge naturally chose. Nika was not cruel at first glance, which made her cruelty harder to explain. She was soft-voiced, easily overwhelmed, always apologizing while doing nothing differently. "I'm sorry. I'm just bad at this," she would whisper, and somehow the sentence always became a rope around my wrists. In my last life, I carried her through the recommendation interview because I thought she would collapse without me. She did collapse later anyway, but only after using my project summary to earn the lab placement that should have gone to me. This life, I stopped translating instructions for her. I stopped checking forms. I stopped answering messages after midnight. I stopped laughing at jokes that were invoices in disguise. The room changed quickly. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. It changed in tiny pressures. Conversations ending when I entered. My mug moved behind the cleaning supplies, my seat at the desk covered with someone else's makeup bag, the group chat renamed without me, the words selfish and cold tossed around when they thought my headphones were loud enough. They wanted the old Elise back. The old Elise had been useful. 2 weeks before finals, Mara tried kindness, which on her looked like a borrowed coat. She waited until Celia and Nika left for brunch, then leaned against my desk with 2 coffees in hand. "Peace offering," she said, placing one beside my laptop. I did not drink it. In my first life, the coffee she gave me during finals week had contained enough sleeping syrup to make me lose half a morning. She claimed later it was her own stress supplement, mixed up by accident. The memory came back with such physical force that my throat tightened. This time I smiled and said, "Thanks. I already had one." Mara's mouth twitched. "You've been weird, Elise." "Have I?"
Come on.
"We're roommates. We're supposed to help each other." There it was. The sacred phrase. Help each other. In our room, that meant I helped and they othered. She sat on the edge of my chair without asking, her voice dropping into the tone she used when she wanted people to think she was honest. "Look, maybe we leaned on you too much before. But finals are scary for everyone. If you help us get through this, we'll make sure people know you were part of it." I almost admired the wording. Not "we'll give you credit." Not "we'll stop taking advantage of you." Just "we'll make sure people know you were part of it," as if my own work was an accessory to their rise. I saved my document, closed my laptop, and looked at her. "Mara, what exactly are you asking for?" She blinked, because people like her hated specific questions. Just the usual. Wake us up on finals day, maybe help organize the review session, check our portfolios, make sure Nika doesn't forget anything, help Celia sound less robotic in her recommendation reflection, and maybe explain the bias audit chapter, because Professor Han loves that stuff. She said it all in one breath, then laughed.
See?
Nothing huge. I thought of my last life, of my body running on 2 hours of sleep, of my own recommendation essay unfinished while I polished Celia's metaphors, of my own practice exam abandoned because Mara could not understand algorithmic accountability unless I turned it into a courtroom drama. Nothing huge. Just my time, my energy, my mind, my future, sliced thin and served under their names. I pushed the untouched coffee back toward her. "No," she stared as if I had slapped her.
No.
"No," her expression changed slowly. The softness drained out. "You know, people are starting to notice how arrogant you've become." I opened my laptop again. Then they're very observant. The first real attack came 5 days later, and it was so sloppy I would have laughed if my first life had not taught me that sloppy lies still worked when pretty people delivered them with confidence. I walked into Professor Han's review seminar and found my seat taken by Mara, Celia, and Nika, their bags spread across the row like a border checkpoint. The only empty chair was at the front beside the projector, where everyone could see me arrive late even though I was 10 minutes early. I sat there without reacting. That bothered them. During the break, Professor Han announced that he had received concerns about unauthorized sharing of study materials in Dormitory 6B. My heartbeat stayed calm because I had expected this, but my fingers went cold anyway. He did not name me. He did not need to. Half the room turned. Mara lowered her eyes with saintly discomfort. Celia touched her throat. Nika looked as if she might cry. In my last life, that moment would have destroyed me. I would have over-explained, defended myself, looked guilty from the force of my own panic. This time, I raised my hand. Professor, could you clarify the concern? Is someone claiming their work was taken, or that assistance was offered? His eyebrows lifted. He was not a war man, but he respected precise language. The concern is that certain students may be producing work that is not fully their own due to excessive collaboration.
Thank you, I said.
In that case, I'd like to state for the record that I have not edited, drafted, rewritten, or organized any roommate's coursework this term. I also have message records confirming I refused requests for that kind of assistance. If needed, I'm happy to forward them. The room went quiet in a different way. Not suspicious. Interested. Mara's head snapped up. Celia's lips parted. Nika whispered, "Elise," as if I had betrayed a family secret. Professor Han studied me for 3 long seconds. "That will not be necessary at this stage," he said, but his tone had changed. After class, Celia cornered me near the stairwell, perfume sweet enough to choke on. "You didn't have to embarrass us. I didn't mention your names. Everyone knows we're your roommates. Then maybe everyone also knows why I needed to be clear." Her eyes sharpened. "Be careful. You're making yourself look difficult." I stepped closer, just enough that she had to stop pretending she was not afraid. "Celia, I spent an entire lifetime being easy. It didn't end well." She laughed nervously because she thought I was being dramatic. I smiled because I was being literal. The pattern interrupt came the next morning when I found my printed exam admission slip missing. Not misplaced.
Missing.
My folder was still zipped. My desk drawer was still shut. The only thing gone was the pale yellow slip required for entry into the finals hall. In my first life, I had discovered this at 7:12 on finals day and nearly vomited from terror. Mara found it under her textbook 10 minutes later, laughing about how we were all losing our minds. That delay made us run. That run made me forget my backup calculator. That forgotten calculator forced me to borrow one from Nika. That borrowed calculator had stored formula notes in memory, which triggered an integrity check, which became the first thread in the net they later wrapped around my throat. This life, I had printed 6 copies. One in my folder, one in my hoodie pocket, one inside my literature anthology because none of them opened books without pictures. One photographed and uploaded to my student portal. One emailed to myself. One sealed in an envelope and handed to the dorm supervisor under the excuse that I was worried about losing it. So when the visible copy disappeared, I did not search the room. I did not accuse anyone. I took a 7th copy from my bag, placed it on the desk, and continued highlighting my review notes. Mara watched from her bed, pretending not to watch. Celia brushed her hair in the mirror with slower and slower strokes. Nika's face turned pink. "Didn't you already print that?" she asked. "Yes." "So, why print another?" "Because important things should have backups." I looked up then directly at Mara, especially when they disappear. Mara rolled her eyes too quickly. "You're paranoid." I nodded. "Maybe. But paranoia with documentation is just preparation." That sentence landed. I saw it land in the tiny pause that followed, in the way Celia set down her brush, in the way Nika suddenly became fascinated by her cuticles. They had expected panic. Panic was the old script. But Rebirth gives you one unfair advantage. You know where the knives are hidden before anyone reaches for them. 3 days before finals, the school announced that the top 5 AI ethics final scores would be invited to present their recommendation portfolios at the Dean's Stage Review, a public event attended by faculty, sponsor representatives, and the Graduate Placement Office. In my first life, that announcement had been the spark that turned my roommates from needy to vicious. They did not just want to pass. They wanted visibility. Mara wanted the sponsor internship because her boyfriend's older brother worked there, and she had already told everyone she was basically hired. Celia wanted the dean's letter because her entire online identity depended on being an effortless academic beauty. Nika wanted the lab placement because her parents had promised to stop calling her fragile if she achieved something impressive alone. I wanted the review because my scholarship renewal depended on it, and because Professor Han had once told me my independent project on biased admissions algorithms was publishable if I survived finals with a clean record. In my last life, I did not survive with a clean record. This life, I read the announcement twice, then saved it as a PDF because public events create public consequences. That night, Mara called an emergency room meeting without inviting me, which was difficult because we all lived in the same room. She sat cross-legged on Celia's bed while Nika hugged a pillow and Celia opened her notes app like a secretary of doom. "We need to discuss the atmosphere," Mara said when I entered. I put my bag down. "The atmosphere? You've been isolating yourself. It's affecting morale." "My studying affects your morale?" Celia gave me a wounded look. "This is exactly what we mean. You twist everything." Nika swallowed. "We're scared, Elise." There it was again, the soft weapon. I waited. Mara leaned forward. "Finals day is huge. We can't afford mistakes. Usually you're the organized one, and now you're acting like helping us is beneath you." "Helping you wake up is beneath me," I said. Silence cracked through the room. Celia inhaled sharply. Mara's face hardened.
Wow.
I sat at my desk and began taking out my books. Set alarms. Sign your forms. Pack your IDs. Read the exam instructions. None of this requires me. "You're really going to let us fail over pride?" Mara asked. That was the moment something in me went perfectly still. I turned in my chair.
"No, Mara.
I'm going to let you experience the morning you personally prepare for." She stood. "You'll regret this." In my last life, those words would have kept me awake all night. In this life, I slept 7 hours and dreamed of an empty stage. The night before finals had a smell. Instant noodles, expensive perfume, printer ink, and fear. The whole dormitory buzzed with last-minute panic. Doors opened and slammed. Girls ran down the hall asking for staplers, calculators, hair ties, Lucky Charms, painkillers, prayers. Someone cried in the laundry room. Someone else shouted that the portal had crashed. Inside 6B, the three of them performed disaster in 3 different genres. Mara paced with flashcards she had made from someone else's summary, reading each one aloud and getting angrier when the answer did not sound familiar. Celia sat at her desk surrounded by color-coded pages, rewriting the title of her reflection essay 9 times while the actual content remained a fog of stolen phrases and inspirational fluff. Nika kept asking whether the exam started at 9 or 9:30, even though the schedule was taped above her desk, emailed twice, posted in the student portal, and written in red on the dorm calendar. I revised quietly with foam earplugs in, but I could still feel their attention crawling over me. They were waiting for the old pattern to resurrect itself at the last second. Any minute now, Elise would sigh, take pity, organize their documents, quiz them, set backup alarms, and sacrifice her own calm so they could borrow it. At 10:14 p.m., Celia turned around. "Elise." I did not remove my earplugs. She repeated my name louder. I took one out. "Yes." Her voice was brittle under the sugar. "Could you just look at my recommendation reflection for 5 minutes? Not edit. Just tell me if it sounds human." "No, 5 minutes." "No, you're already done studying. That doesn't make my time public property." Mara laughed from her bed. Listen to her. Public property. You learned one phrase from ethics and built a personality. I put the earplug back in. That made her angrier than any insult would have. At 11:03, Nika whispered, "Can you wake me if I don't hear my alarm?" I looked at her for a long moment. She looked small under her blanket, eyes wet, face soft. In my first life, this was where I always broke. Nika knew it. She had survived for years by finding the exact shape of other people's mercy. "Nika," I said, "I'm not responsible for waking you." Her mouth trembled. "I know. I just thought, because we're friends," I felt the old guilt rise like water in a sealed room. Then I remembered her testimony. Elise made me feel helpless. She took over everything and then punished us emotionally. I remembered the committee nodding as if my help had been a crime and her helplessness evidence. I said, "Friends don't turn responsibility into a trap." She rolled over and cried quietly enough to be heard. Celia climbed into bed at midnight. Mara stayed up until 1:40 scrolling exam rumors. I turned off my lamp at 10:30 and closed my eyes with both alarms set under my pillow, not because I was nervous I would oversleep, but because I wanted my hands free in the morning. Freedom, I had learned, sometimes sounds exactly like someone else's unanswered alarm. At 6:12 on finals day, after all three alarms had failed their owners, I got out of bed.
Slowly, peacefully.
Almost ceremonially. The floor was cold under my feet. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, braided my hair, and put on my uniform with a navy blazer I had ironed the night before. I packed 2 black pens, 2 blue pens, a transparent pencil case, my student ID, my admission slip, a water bottle with the label removed, my calculator cleared and checked, and the small envelope of documentation I had prepared in case history tried to repeat itself with better lighting. Mara snored once, a harsh little sound. Celia had one hand over her eyes like a tragic heroine in a painting. Nika's blanket had slipped to the floor. I stepped around it. At the door, I paused, not because I was tempted to wake them, but because my body still remembered being the girl who would have. Muscle memory is cruel. It keeps offering motions your soul has outgrown. My hand lifted half an inch toward the light switch. I saw, in a flash, my first life, me flipping the light on, Mara groaning, Celia whining about migraines, Nika crying that she could not do this, me becoming alarm clock, mother, tutor, porter, emotional support animal, shield. I saw us sprinting across campus, my lungs burning, Mara blaming me for not waking her earlier, Celia snapping that my stress was contagious, Nika begging me to carry her portfolio because her hands were shaking. I saw the future that came after saving them. The accusation, the stage, their smiles, my empty inbox. My hand dropped. I opened the door and left in darkness. The hallway was a river of panic, but I moved through it like a stone under clear water. Girls rushed past with wet hair, untied shoes, toast in their mouths, flashcards fluttering like frightened birds. Someone from 6A called, "Elise, where are your roommates?" I kept walking, sleeping. She laughed because she thought I was joking. Downstairs, the dorm supervisor, Mrs. Chiao, sat behind the front desk with her thermos and her terrifyingly accurate attendance clipboard. "Good morning, Elise," she said. Early as usual. "Good morning." Her eyes flicked behind me. The others? I don't know their plans. That was true. It was also the cleanest sentence I had ever spoken. Outside, campus looked too beautiful for Judgment Day. The cherry trees along the east path were pale with spring flowers. The library windows reflected a pink sky. Banners for finals excellence week snapped in the breeze as if the school had decorated for a sacrifice. I walked past the cafeteria, where students chugged coffee and whispered predictions. I reached the exam hall at 7:18, more than an hour early, and found Professor Han standing near the entrance with a stack of integrity forms. In my first life, I arrived sweating at 8:56, hair falling out, pulse wild, and he looked at me with disappointment before anything had even happened. This time, he looked at my neat folder, my calm face, and nodded. "Prepared?" "Yes, Professor." "Good." A single word. It should not have mattered.
It did.
I entered the waiting area and sat under the large clock, not hidden, not frantic, not useful to anyone but myself. At 7:44, I received the first message. It was from Nika. "Elise?" Then, "Elise, please." Then, "What time is it?" I looked at the clock. I did not answer. At 7:46, Mara called. I watched her name flash across my screen until it stopped. At 7:47, Celia sent 12 question marks. At 7:49, the room chat exploded. "Why didn't you wake us? Elise, this is not funny.
We have to leave now.
Where is my admission slip? Did you take my black pen? Nika can't find her ID. Answer your phone." Answer. I turned my phone face down on the desk. My hands trembled once, then steadied. Around me, students murmured, reviewed, prayed. The clock ticked with obscene calm. At 8:03, Mara sent a voice message. I did not play it then, but the transcript appeared. "You psycho, if we miss this because of you, I swear to God." Then another message, deleted. Then Celia privately, "Please, I know we fought, but don't ruin our lives. Tell Professor Han we're coming. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny. Because even in free fall, she wanted me to manage the landing. At 8:20, the exam staff began checking IDs. At 8:32, I signed the attendance sheet. At 8:45, Professor Han announced that doors would close at 9 o'clock sharp. In accordance with the finals policy, every student had acknowledged in writing. At 8:51, my phone buzzed again. A photo from Mara, blurry, taken in the back of a taxi. Celia's face was half made up and white with panic. Nika was crying into her sleeve. Mara's caption read, "You better fix this." I looked at the photo for exactly 1 second, then powered off my phone. There is a particular kind of silence that falls after exam doors close. It is not peaceful. It is mechanical. At 9 o'clock, the proctor shut the main hall doors with both hands, and the sound traveled through the room like a verdict. No one spoke. Papers were distributed face down. The clock clicked to 9:01. In my first life, this was the minute I realized Nika's calculator had unauthorized memory notes and raised my hand in terror before the proctor discovered it, trying to explain, trying to protect myself, trying to protect her too, because even then I was stupid with loyalty. This time, my desk held only my cleared calculator, my pens, my water, my ID. Nothing borrowed. Nothing shared. Nothing that smelled like another person's carelessness. "Begin," the proctor said. I turned over the paper. The first question was the exact one Professor Han had hinted at in week 8. Evaluate the ethical failure of an automated scholarship screening model when proxy variables reproduce socioeconomic exclusion. In my first life, I had taught that concept to Mara using colored sticky notes and a metaphor about locked doors. She wrote my metaphor almost word for word and received full marks. This time, the metaphor stayed in my head and became mine again. I wrote cleanly, quickly, with a calm that felt almost holy. Question 2 asked for a bias audit design. Question 3 asked for stakeholder accountability. A question 4 included a case study about recommendation algorithms, and I nearly smiled because my independent project had lived inside that question long before Celia used pieces of it in her reflection. Outside the hall, at 9:17, there was a commotion. A muffled voice. A sharp knock. Then Mara, unmistakable even through oak doors. "Please, we're only 17 minutes late." Pens paused across the room. Professor Han walked to the entrance with the chief proctor. We could not see them, but we could hear enough. Policy. Cut off. No entry after commencement. Medical documentation only. No, oversleeping did not qualify. No, a roommate failing to wake you did not qualify. My pen did not stop. That was my real revenge. Not watching them beg, not savoring their panic, but continuing my answer while the consequences they had outsourced finally returned to sender. At 10:36, the second pattern interrupt arrived because Mara was never the kind of person to accept a locked door when a window could be broken. The proctor nearest the stage received a message, frowned, and walked to Professor Han. Professor Han read it, then glanced toward me. I kept writing, though every nerve in my body sharpened. 5 minutes later, he approached my desk, low-voiced.
Elise.
Are you able to continue? My stomach tightened. Yes, Professor. Your roommates are claiming you intentionally interfered with their attendance this morning. There it was. The old net, thrown early. In my first life, accusations arrived after the exam, after they had secured their scores. In this life, desperation moved the timeline forward. I looked up. What kind of interference? They allege you agreed to wake them and withheld that assistance maliciously. One claims an admission slip may have been moved. The room around us blurred at the edges, but my voice stayed even. Professor, I did not agree to wake anyone. I did not touch anyone's admission slip. I have written messages from last night confirming I told Nika I was not responsible for waking her. I also have backups of my own documents, because my slip previously went missing. His expression did not change, but his eyes became more attentive. Can you provide those records after the exam? Yes. For now, continue. This will not affect your exam time. He returned to the front. I looked down at my paper and realized my hand had left a small ink beside the word accountability. For one breath, rage rose so fiercely I thought it might burn through my ribs. Even locked outside, even late, even unprepared, they had reached for me. They still believed my name belonged in their explanation. I pressed my pen to the page and wrote the next sentence harder than necessary. Accountability mechanisms fail when responsibility is diffused through informal dependence and no participant is required to own the predictable outcome of their choices. It was the best sentence I had written all term. The exam ended at noon. When the proctor called time, the room exhaled. Students stretched, groaned, whispered comparisons, performed the normal rituals of survival. I stayed seated until my paper was collected. My legs felt oddly light when I stood, as if I had been carrying 3 sleeping bodies for years and had only just set them down. Outside the hall, the corridor was crowded, but I saw my roommates immediately because panic makes people bright. Mara stood near the notice board, hair unbrushed under a crooked headband, blazer wrinkled, face flushed with fury. Celia's mascara had smudged at the corners, though she had clearly tried to repair it in the taxi. Nika looked hollow, clutching her unsigned admission slip like a dead bird. Beside them stood Mrs. Chiao, the dorm supervisor, and Assistant Dean Lin, whose expression could make boiling water freeze. Mara pointed at me as soon as I emerged. There she is. Every nearby student turned.
Perfect.
In my first life, they destroyed me in rooms with closed doors. This life, they chose a corridor full of witnesses. Assistant Dean Lin lifted one hand before Mara could continue. Elise, Professor Han informed me you may have relevant records. Are you willing to discuss this now? Yes. Mara laughed sharply. Of course she is. She probably prepared a whole performance. I looked at her. You're the one who brought an audience. Celia flinched. A few students murmured. Assistant Dean Lin's gaze moved between us. We will keep this factual. Mara, Celia, and Nika state that there was an established dorm agreement in which Elise provided wake-up support on major assessment days. They state that Elise intentionally deviated from this agreement without notice, causing them to miss the exam. I almost admired how official they made laziness sound. I opened my folder and took out 3 printed screenshots, each with timestamps. There was no agreement. Last night, Nika asked me to wake her if she missed her alarm. I replied that I was not responsible for waking her. Earlier this week, Mara requested that I organize finals morning tasks, and I said no. 3 weeks ago, I notified the room chat that I would not edit, organize, or manage anyone else's coursework this term. Assistant Dean Lin accepted the pages. Mrs. Chiao leaned closer. Mara's face changed one shade at a time. Celia whispered, You printed private messages? I said, You made private messages relevant when you filed a public accusation. Mara recovered first, because shamelessness is a kind of stamina. That doesn't prove she didn't mess with our alarms. I took out another page. I didn't touch your alarms. I left the room at 6:28. Mrs. Chiao saw me sign out at 6:31. The dorm hallway camera would show I didn't return. Mrs. Chiao nodded. She signed out at 6:31. I can confirm the log. Celia's voice shook. But she knew we were asleep. She could have turned on the light. She could have said something. Assistant Dean Lin looked at her over the screenshots. Are you stating that your attendance depended on another student verbally waking you despite your own alarms? Celia opened her mouth, then closed it. Nika started crying. The sound tugged at old reflexes, but I stood still. Mara snapped. Don't twist this. She wanted this to happen. She's been hostile for weeks. Hostile how? Assistant Dean Lin asked. She refused to help us. Refusal to provide academic or personal assistance is not hostility. Mara looked betrayed by the English language. You don't understand. She always helped before. She changed suddenly. Professor Han had joined us silently, exam papers in hand. Students are allowed to change boundaries. That sentence was small. It was also the first adult sentence I had ever heard in my defense. Celia saw the situation slipping and reached for the prettier lie. We were worried about Elise. She became obsessed with documentation, like she expected us to attack her. It made the room unsafe. In my first life, that word had been a weapon. Unsafe. It made committees lean forward. It made evidence feel aggressive. This time, I did not rush. I took out the envelope. Since safety is being mentioned, I'd like to report that my printed admission slip disappeared from my closed folder 3 days ago. I did not accuse anyone because I had backups. I also have a photo showing the slip in place before I left for dinner and a photo after I returned. Mara rolled her eyes. Are you serious? Assistant Dean Lin was very serious. Do you know where the missing slip is? No, I said. Then Mrs. Chiao cleared her throat. Everyone looked at her. This morning, when Nika came downstairs, she asked if she could enter the exam with a copy of Elise's admission slip because she couldn't find her completed one. The corridor went quiet.
Nika made a small sound.
Assistant Dean Lin turned slowly. Nika? Nika's lips trembled. I was panicking. I didn't mean. I thought maybe if they saw we were roommates. Mara hissed, shut up. Too late. Truth, like blood, spreads fastest when someone tries to wipe it with bare hands. By 1:15, the three of them were not only locked out of the exam, they were locked inside an investigation they had opened themselves. The school allowed missed finals only under documented emergency circumstances. Oversleeping did not qualify. Failure to bring signed admission materials did not qualify. Depending on a roommate did not qualify. Attempting to use another student's document, however, qualified for a very different office. I spent the next hour in a small conference room with Assistant Dean Lin, Professor Han, and an integrity officer named Ms. Ren, who had the calm, devastating voice of someone who had ended many academic careers before lunch. I provided screenshots, sign-out logs, file version histories, and the messages where I refused to edit essays. I also provided something I had not planned to reveal unless necessary, a folder comparing my independent project draft from 4 weeks earlier with phrases from Celia's recommendation reflection draft she had carelessly left open on the shared printer queue. In my first life, Celia's final version had won praise for its unusually mature ethical framing. In this life, without my editing, her draft was worse, but the stolen bones still showed. Ms. Ren read silently for a long time. Why didn't you report this earlier? She asked. It was not accusatory. Still, my throat tightened. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me unless there was a pattern. Professor Han looked down at the papers. There is a pattern. Those 4 words landed heavier than any apology could have. I did not cry, but my eyes burned. Through the conference room window, I could see the courtyard where students were taking celebratory photos after finals. Somewhere out there, Mara was probably telling anyone who would listen that I was a snake. Celia was probably rehearsing victimhood. Nika was probably apologizing to whichever authority looked kindest. But for the first time, their panic was not my emergency. Their lies were not my homework. Their consequences did not require my attendance. The dean's stage review was scheduled for 5 that evening, and the school, obsessed with ceremony, refused to cancel it just because 3 candidates had detonated themselves before breakfast. Exam scores were processed quickly for the top group because sponsor representatives were already on campus. In my first life, Mara, Celia, and Nika all made the top 5, partly from my notes, partly from the confidence of arriving as a trio with every logistical detail managed. I placed 7th after the calculator incident and the stress penalty from the accusation. This life, when the preliminary results appeared at 3:40, my name was first, not second, not barely included, first. Elise Varon, 96.5. The number looked unreal, like a door where a wall used to be. Professor Han sent a message. Your project presentation will be moved to the central slot. Be prepared to discuss your audit model. I read it twice, then a 3rd time. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. I had thought victory would feel like lightning. Instead, it felt like oxygen. Simple, necessary, overdue. At 4:10, while I was reviewing my slides in the library, Mara found me. She did not approach with rage this time. Rage had failed. She came softly, alone, hair smoothed, face pale, voice low. Elise. I did not look away from my laptop. What do you need? She flinched at the question because need was the only language she had left. They're saying we might not get a makeup exam. That's the policy. You could tell them we had a misunderstanding. We didn't. She gripped the back of the chair across from me. You don't get it. My sponsor interview depends on passing this final. My parents already think I'm irresponsible. If this goes on my record, then they'll be correctly informed. Her eyes flashed. You're enjoying this. I closed my laptop.
No.
I enjoyed my breakfast. I enjoyed writing my exam. I enjoyed seeing my name first because it was mine. This. I gestured between us. This is just you discovering the floor after standing on my back. For once, Mara had no immediate answer. She looked younger without her audience.
Smaller.
Not harmless. Never harmless. Just smaller. Please, she whispered. The word should have moved me. It did not. In my last life, I said quietly. I begged too. Her brow furrowed. What? Nothing. Good luck, Mara. I stood and walked past her before she could turn desperation into another accusation. The auditorium at 5 smelled of polished wood, camera equipment, and expensive flowers. Parents, faculty members, sponsor representatives, and students filled the rows. The dean's stage review was not technically an award ceremony, but the school treated any event with a microphone as a chance to manufacture prestige. A large screen displayed the title, Ethics, Intelligence, and Future Leadership. In my first life, I sat near the back while my roommates stood under those lights. Mara spoke boldly about responsible innovation, using examples I had explained to her while she ate chips on my bed. Celia gave a graceful reflection on humility and academic collaboration, wearing the pearl earrings she bought with money she owed me. Nika cried during her speech and received a standing ovation for vulnerability. I clapped because not clapping would have looked bitter. Later, a photo of them on stage went viral in the school forum. Dorm 6B Queens sweep the review. Someone commented, "Where's Elise? Didn't she used to be the smart one?" This life, the seating chart had changed. Mara, Celia, and Nika were not listed as presenters. Their names appeared nowhere except, perhaps, in a sealed folder on Ms. Wren's desk. I stood backstage with the other 4 top scorers, listening to the murmur of the audience. My reflection in the black side curtain looked unfamiliar. Same face, same uniform, but the posture was new. Shoulders relaxed. Chin level. No bag under my eyes from fixing other people's emergencies.
Professor step beside me.
Your slides are strong, he said. I nodded. Thank you. After a pause, he added, I should have noticed the imbalance in your dorm earlier. I looked at him, surprised. He was not a man who apologized easily. You notice now. Late noticing still has consequences. Yes, I said. It does. He accepted that without defense, which made me respect him more than any polished apology would have. Then, because fate has a taste for theater, I saw them enter the auditorium together just before the event began. Mara first, jaw tight, wearing makeup like armor. Celia beside her, eyes red but posture graceful, already performing wounded dignity for anyone who looked. Nika trailed behind, face blotchy, clutching tissues. They sat in the 5th row, not too close, not too far, close enough for me to see them when I stepped on stage. For a second, my body reacted as if I were back in the first life. My stomach dropped. My palms cooled. The stage lights became the lights of the committee room, the corridor, the graduation hall where they smiled over my ruin. Then the announcer called my name. Elise Varon, first-ranked finalist in AI ethics and candidate for the dean's recommendation. Applause rose. Not thunderous. Not yet. But real. I walked into it. Every step across the stage felt like crossing a border. The screen behind me lit with my title, When Help Becomes Hidden Infrastructure, Bias, Dependency, and Accountability in Automated Recommendation Systems. A murmur moved through the audience at the phrase hidden infrastructure. I had chosen it carefully. My project was not about my roommates, not directly. That would have been petty and easy. My project studied how systems exploit invisible labor, how institutions reward polished outcomes without auditing who absorbed the cost, how recommendation models can mistake supported performance for independent merit. In my first life, I had lived as hidden infrastructure. This life I named the machine. I began with a story, but not mine. Imagine, I said, 3 applicants submit equally impressive portfolios. Their outputs appear similar. Their scores are high. Their interviews are polished. A recommendation system ranks them as independent high performers. But the system never asks a critical question. What invisible support produced that performance? And was that support ethical, voluntary, acknowledged, or exploited? The auditorium stilled. In the 5th row, Mara's face hardened. Celia looked down. Nika's tissue froze near her mouth. I continued, voice steady. In automated admissions and scholarship screening, we often measure the final product while ignoring the dependency structure behind it. This creates 2 failures. First, it rewards candidates who are skilled at absorbing uncredited labor. Second, it penalizes the labor source, especially when that person appears less socially polished, less rested, or less collaborative because they have been carrying the system's hidden costs. I clicked to the next slide, a model diagram showing input distortion, support asymmetry, and false merit signals. Sponsor representatives leaned forward. Professor Han watched without expression, but his eyes were bright. My audit model introduces a dependency declaration layer, version history comparison, and reflective authorship defense to distinguish collaboration from extraction. The goal is not to punish students for receiving help. Ethical support matters. The goal is to identify when help becomes coercive, concealed, or later weaponized against the person who provided it. That sentence changed the air. It was academic. It was precise. It was also a knife laid flat on a table where everyone could see the handle. Halfway through my presentation, the auditorium doors opened again. Assistant Dean Lin entered with Ms. Run and 2 staff members from the registrar's office. They did not interrupt. They stood along the back wall. Most people did not notice, but Mara did. I saw her shoulders tighten. Celia whispered something. Nika began crying again, silently this time. I did not look at them after that. My next slide showed a case simulation. Candidate A produces independent work with documented drafts. Candidate B submits polished work inconsistent with prior samples and unsupported by process evidence. Candidate C claims emotional dependence on peer assistance while denying that peer's contribution. The audience saw a clean academic framework. My roommates saw a mirror with the lights turned on. During the question period, a sponsor representative asked, "How would your model avoid discouraging genuine peer collaboration?" Good question. In my first life, Mara had answered a similar one with a phrase I taught her. Collaboration should leave fingerprints, not bruises. The line had received applause. This life, I reclaimed it. Genuine collaboration leaves transparent fingerprints, I said. There are shared documents, acknowledged roles, mutual benefit, and consistent skill development. Exploitation leaves bruises. One person becomes depleted while another becomes decorated, and when questioned, the decorated person denies the ladder they climbed. A ripple moved through the room. Not applause yet. Something better. Recognition. The dean, seated in the front row, wrote something on his program. Professor Han's mouth almost smiled. I finished with the recommendation. Institutions should not only evaluate excellence, but audit the conditions under which excellence appears. When I said thank you, the applause rose slowly, then strongly, then into something that made my throat close. I bowed. In the 5th row, Mara did not clap. Celia clapped twice because not clapping would look bad. Nika clapped while crying, which would have worked beautifully if anyone were still watching her. The collapse came not during my speech, but immediately after the review, which made it cleaner. Public humiliation is loud. Public accountability is colder. The dean returned to the podium for closing remarks, praised the finalists, thanked the sponsors, and then adjusted his glasses in a way that made every administrator in the room sit straighter. Before final recommendation decisions are confirmed, he said, the school wishes to remind all students that academic excellence is inseparable from academic integrity. Due to concerns raised today and evidence submitted through appropriate channels, several candidate files have been placed under review. No recommendations will be issued for those candidates until the review is complete. He did not name them. He did not need to. In the fifth row, Mara stood so abruptly her chair struck the row behind her. Heads turned. Celia grabbed her wrist, whispering urgently. Nika covered her face. Mara looked at me, and for one reckless second I thought she might shout across the auditorium. Instead, Assistant Dean Lin appeared at the end of their row. Ms. Rin stood at the other end. A quiet corridor formed without anyone ordering it. That was the difference between school gossip and institutional action. Gossip swarms. Institutions close doors. Mara sat back down. Celia's face went gray. Nika lowered her hands and looked, for the first time, not sad but trapped. Around them, students whispered, not cruelly at first.
Curiously.
Then, with memory, people began connecting small things. How Mara always had summaries she never made. How Celia's writing style changed near deadlines. How Nika's helplessness somehow produced perfect outcomes. How I had looked more exhausted every time they looked more brilliant. The narrative did not flip all at once. It peeled, layer by layer. And under it, finally, was the shape of what had happened. After the auditorium emptied, I went outside instead of waiting to hear more. The sky had turned violet over the campus roofs. The cherry blossoms looked silver under the lamps. I stood near the steps, breathing air that did not belong to anyone else, and for several minutes, that was enough. Then Celia found me.
Of course she did.
She had always been the best at choosing scenery for emotional scenes. She came down the steps slowly, arms wrapped around herself, eyes shining. Elise, she said. I almost told her to leave. Instead, I waited. She stopped 2 steps above me, ensuring she would look fragile from the right angle. I know you hate us right now. I don't hate you. That seemed to unsettle her more than hatred would have. Then why are you doing this? I looked up at her. I'm not doing anything to you. I stopped doing things for you. You're confusing the two because you built your safety on my exhaustion. Her face twisted. That's not fair.
No.
It's accurate. She looked away toward the courtyard where students were laughing, free from our little tragedy. You don't understand what it's like for me. Everyone expects me to be perfect. My parents, my followers, the department. If I look average for even a second, people enjoy it. So you use me to avoid looking average. I needed help. You needed ownership. Her eyes flashed through the tears. You think you're so morally clean? You planned this. You waited for us to fail. I waited for you to prepare. Same thing. There it was, the whole problem, delivered in 2 words. To Celia, a world where I did not rescue her was indistinguishable from sabotage. I stepped back from the stairs.
No, Celia.
Sabotage is taking someone's work, hiding behind their labor, then calling them unstable when they ask to be seen. Consequence is sleeping through an exam because you set an alarm and ignored it. She swallowed hard. They'll ruin me. No, I said. They'll review you. For a moment, she looked like she might slap me. Then her expression folded into something smaller and uglier than sadness. You were easier to love when you were useful. I nodded because I had known that for 2 lifetimes. And you were easier to pity before you said that out loud. Nika sent me a message at 9:03 that night. I saw it after dinner, after my interview with the sponsor panel, after Professor Han told me my project would be nominated for the undergraduate ethics journal, after the dean's office confirmed my recommendation was moving forward. I was sitting alone in the dorm common room because 6B had become a crime scene of emotions, and I was not ready to watch them pack their outrage into overnight bags. Nika's message was long. It began with apologies, wandered into explanations, then curled back into need. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said Mara pressured everyone. She said Celia made things sound normal. She said she was scared. She said she always admired me. She said if I could just tell Ms. Run that the admission slip thing was a panic mistake, maybe the investigation would be lighter. She ended with, "You know I'm not like them." In my first life, that sentence would have opened a door. Nika's power had always been exception. She wanted to be separated from consequences by being softer than the others, less sharp, less obviously guilty. But softness is not innocence. a pillow can smother. I typed several replies and deleted them. Too harsh. Too kind. Too explanatory. Finally, I wrote, Nika, I believe you were scared. I do not believe fear makes your choices mine to repair. Tell the truth to Ms. Ren. That is the only help I can offer. She read it immediately. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again, then stopped. I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed. Someone shouted Mara's name. Someone else cried. The dormitory was finally experiencing the emotional climate I used to absorb before it reached them. It was loud. It was ugly. It was not mine. The investigation moved faster than gossip, but slower than justice, which is to say everyone suffered in public for a week while administrators used words like process. Mara's missed final became an automatic failure pending appeal. Her appeal collapsed when the taxi receipt confirmed pickup at 8:38 from the dorm entrance, long after any reasonable departure time. Her claim that I had agreed to wake her collapsed under screenshots. Her claim that I moved materials collapsed when Mrs. Chiao submitted hallway footage showing Celia entering my desk area 2 nights before finals while I was at the library. Celia said she was borrowing tape. There was no tape on my desk. What there was, according to the footage, was my yellow admission slip, which disappeared from view when she stepped away. The school did not need to prove she intended to use it. Possession and interference were enough to freeze her recommendation. Then came the document comparisons. My project drafts, Celia's reflection, Mara's essay outline, even Nika's interview notes. They had not copied whole pages. They were too clever for that, or maybe too cowardly. They copied structures, metaphors, examples, argument sequences. In isolation, each overlap could be explained. Together, they formed a map of extraction. Professor Han reviewed earlier writing samples and found what he called sudden sophistication inconsistent with demonstrated process. Celia hated that phrase so much, she posted a vague story about being punished for growth. It stayed up 11 minutes before her advisor told her to delete it. Mara tried to rally support by telling students I had set them up, but the story had a design flaw. All I had done was not wake them. The more she repeated it, the worse she sounded. So, your defense is that Elise didn't perform unpaid labor? Someone asked in the cafeteria. Mara threw soup at her. That added a conduct violation. Nika cooperated first, of course. She admitted she had used my frameworks too heavily and said she felt unable to say no when Mara and Celia normalized it. Ms. Run thanked her for honesty and still recommended a penalty. Nika cried for 2 days. I did not comfort her. Each time guilt came near me, I asked it one question. Did they comfort you when your future collapsed? Guilt had no answer. Meanwhile, my life became strangely quiet. Not easy. Quiet. I moved out of 6B into a single room on the scholarship floor after Professor Han wrote a recommendation for emergency relocation. The room was smaller, older, with a radiator that clicked at night and a window facing the back of the library, but it was mine. No one left wet towels on my books. No one borrowed chargers without asking. No one entered while I slept and whispered as if my presence were a problem to solve. The first morning there, my alarm rang at 6:30. I woke, turned it off, and lay still in the silence, waiting for the panic of 3 other lives to crash into mine. It did not. I cried then, unexpectedly, not because I was sad, but because my nervous system did not know what to do with peace. People think revenge is fire. Sometimes it is a locked door, a clean desk, an uninterrupted breakfast. Sometimes it is eating toast slowly while your phone stays silent. My sponsor interview took place 2 days later. The panel asked about my audit model, my research experience, and why I seemed particularly interested in hidden labor. I gave the professional answer first, because systems often misattribute merit when they evaluate outputs without context. Then, after a breath, I gave the honest answer carefully enough to remain elegant. Because institutions sometimes reward the person standing at the podium while overlooking the person who built the staircase. I want to design systems that notice the staircase. The lead sponsor, a woman with silver hair and a stare like a searchlight, smiled. That sounds personal. It is, I said. That's why I'm careful with it. I received the internship offer that evening. The final disciplinary hearing happened 10 days after finals. I was not required to attend the whole thing, only to provide a statement and answer questions, but I chose to go because in my first life decisions about me happened behind doors while I waited outside like a suspect in my own story. This time, I walked into the hearing room in a clean white blouse, hair tied back, folder in hand, and sat across from the 3 girls who had once sat across from me. The reversal was not satisfying in the way I expected. Mara looked furious but exhausted, her confidence bruised, purple under the eyes. Celia looked composed until you noticed her hands twisting a tissue to threads under the table. Nika looked at me only once, then stared at her lap. Assistant Dean Lin chaired the meeting. Ms. Run presented the findings: failure to attend final examination without valid emergency cause, false or misleading accusation against another student, unauthorized use or attempted use of another student's academic materials, undocumented dependence in recommendation portfolio preparation, possible misrepresentation of authorship. Each phrase landed like a stamp. Mara interrupted twice and was warned twice. Celia argued that academic influence was subjective and that talented students naturally learned from each other. Professor Han asked her to explain 3 technical phrases from her own reflection. She defined one incorrectly, one vaguely, and one with wording almost identical to my draft. The silence after that was brutal. Nika admitted wrongdoing, apologized to the committee, then turned to me with wet eyes. "I'm sorry, Elise," she said. I looked at her for a long second. I could have destroyed her more. I could have said what I knew from the first life, things she had not yet done in this one. But punishment for future crimes belongs to gods and bad writers. I was neither. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "Nothing more. Forgiveness is not a vending machine where apology goes in and absolution drops out." The penalties were announced in writing the next morning. Mara received a 0 for the final, a conduct violation for false reporting and aggressive behavior, and removal from sponsor consideration for the year. Celia received a frozen recommendation, mandatory authorship review for all submitted portfolio materials, and a failing mark on the reflection component after she could not defend its content. Nika received a 0 for the missed final but a reduced integrity penalty for cooperation, though her lab placement was withdrawn. All 3 were removed from the Dean's stage review candidate list. None were expelled. In my first life, I might have thought that was too merciful. This life, I understood that consequences do not need to be cinematic to be permanent. A 0 in the right place can reroute an entire future. A withdrawn recommendation can close doors that once seemed automatic. A reputation for needing uncredited labor sticks to polished girls like smoke and silk. The school forum, of course, turned feral. Someone posted the event schedule with 3 names crossed out. Someone else posted a meme of alarm clocks wearing graduation caps. I did not like the cruelty, even when it pointed away from me. Mob justice has no memory and no conscience. Today it laughed at them. Tomorrow it could laugh at someone innocent. So, I posted nothing. I corrected no rumors except one. When someone claimed I had hidden their phones, I replied once from my verified account. No phones were hidden. They slept through their own alarms. The rest is under review. That sentence spread faster than any insult. It was too plain to fight. Mara moved out first. She packed violently, as if drawers had betrayed her. I happened to be in the old room collecting the last of my books when she shoved clothes into a suitcase. Celia was absent, probably at an advisor meeting. Nika had gone home for the weekend. For a while, the only sounds were zippers, hangers, and Mara's angry breathing. Then she said, without turning, "Do you feel powerful now?" I considered lying. Yes. She spun around. "At least you admit it. I don't mean powerful over you. I mean powerful over me." Her laugh was ugly. "That's a nice line. Did you write it for your next speech?" I picked up my anatomy notebook from a shelf.
No.
"I learned it by not answering your calls." Mara's face tightened. For a second, I saw the girl under the performance. Not innocent, not misunderstood, but terrified of being ordinary, because ordinary would force her to build something with her own hands. "You think you're better than us," she said.
No.
I think I'm responsible for myself. Same thing to people like you. I almost asked what people like me meant, but I already knew. Scholarship girls. Serious girls. Girls who make effort visible and therefore embarrass those who rely on charm. Girls who are supposed to help gratefully and disappear politely. Instead, I said, Mara, you would rather call me arrogant than admit I was useful because usefulness was the only way you knew how to value me. She looked away first. That was new. You could have woken us, she muttered. There it was, stripped of all decoration. Not innocence. Not misunderstanding. Just the original demand, still alive under the rubble. I walked to the door with my books against my chest. Yes, I said. I could have. Then I left, and the sentence closed behind me like a lock. Celia's downfall was quieter, and therefore more painful for her. She did not throw soup, shout in corridors, or send threats. She curated sadness. For 3 days, her social media became a museum of soft lighting and resilience quotes. A photo of rain on the window. A caption about being misunderstood by people you trusted. A close-up of her hand over a notebook with the words starting over visible in the corner. The problem was that starting over required starting, and Celia had never built the muscles. Without my frameworks, her revision work became vague and circular. Without borrowed insight, her advisor found her reflections shallow. Without the stage, her followers sensed blood. The same people who once praised her effortless brilliance began asking what exactly she had achieved. She messaged me once, a week after the penalties.
Can we talk?
Not about the case. About us. I almost ignored it. Then I agreed to meet in the empty art courtyard at noon because some conversations are not for healing. They are for confirming the wound has edges. She arrived in a cream cardigan, hair pinned back, face bare enough to suggest honesty, while still being carefully arranged. I'm transferring dorms, she said. I heard. My parents are furious. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands. I keep thinking about what you said. About me confusing you, not helping with harm. That surprised me. And I think maybe I did. The old Elise would have softened immediately, rushed to comfort the confession, rewarded the smallest self-awareness like a teacher giving stickers. I waited. Celia swallowed. But you also have to understand, when someone is always strong, people assume they don't mind carrying things. That's not understanding. That's an excuse with better posture. Pain flashed across her face. You're still so sharp. I used to cut myself smaller, so no one else felt the edge. I'm done. She nodded slowly, tears gathering but not falling. For once, she did not use them. I don't know who I am without everyone thinking I'm impressive. There it was, the closest thing to truth she had offered. I could have pitied her. I did, a little. But pity is not a bridge unless both people are willing to walk. Then find out before you apply for another recommendation, I said. She laughed once, broken and real. You really won't make this easy. No, I said. That's the kindest thing I can do. Nika was the last to leave my orbit and she did it by accident. 2 weeks after finals, I found her sitting outside Professor Han's office, hands clasped around a paper cup, eyes swollen. I almost walked past. Then she said, I told them everything. I stopped. She did not look up. About last term too. About the peer review you wrote for Mara. About Celia using your project idea before. About me asking you to rehearse my answers and then pretending I came up with them.
My pulse changed.
Last term had not been officially part of the investigation. I had buried some of it because proving everything would require digging through pain I was not ready to exhume. Why? I asked. Nika rubbed her thumb over the cup lid. Because you told me the truth was the only help you could offer. I did not know what to say. She gave a small, humorless smile. Don't worry. I'm not becoming noble. I just got tired of being scared. Mara makes fear loud. Celia makes it pretty. I make it helpless. It's still fear. That sentence stayed with me. Maybe Nika had always been more observant than I gave her credit for. Maybe she had finally been forced to observe herself. What happens now? I asked. Academic probation. Counseling requirement. No recommendation this year. My parents are coming tomorrow. She tried to laugh and failed. I keep wanting to ask you what to say to them. I looked at her. And I won't. For the first time, I felt something loosen between us that was not forgiveness but release. Nika stood, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry I made being weak into your job. That was the apology that mattered. Not because it fixed anything. Because it named the thing. I nodded. I hope you become stronger for yourself. She looked like she might cry again, but she smiled instead. I hope you stop measuring strength by how much you can survive. Then she walked into Professor Han's office, leaving me in the hallway with a sentence I did not know I needed. Success did not erase the first life. That was the part no one tells you in Rebirth stories. You can change the outcome and still remember the original ending. You can stand first in the ranking and still wake some nights with your heart racing because a dream committee has asked you to prove your own handwriting. You can receive the sponsor internship, the dean's recommendation, the journal nomination, and still flinch when someone says, "Can you do me a small favor?" Healing was not a montage. It was administrative. I changed passwords. I stopped sharing editable documents. I learned to say, I can explain the concept, but I won't touch your submission. I kept office hour records. I made friends slowly with people who did not punish boundaries. One was Ria from the robotics lab, who asked before sitting beside me and once returned a borrowed pen within the hour, which nearly made me propose lifelong loyalty on the spot. Another was June, a statistics major who reviewed my audit model and argued with my assumptions so cleanly I almost cried from the pleasure of equal exchange. You have a savior injury, he told me one afternoon after I over-offered help on his dataset. A what? You treat not saving people like harming them. I stared at him. That's annoyingly accurate.
Good.
Stop it. Real friends, I discovered, do not need your collapse as proof of affection. They let you remain whole. They also wake themselves up for exams, which is an underrated foundation for intimacy. At the end of the semester, the school held the formal recommendation ceremony. This was different from the stage review. Smaller, official, no dramatic presentations, just names called, letters handed over, photos taken under the crest. In my first life, this ceremony had been the place where I finally understood I had lost. I stood at the edge of the hall while Mara posed with her sponsor packet. Celia kissed her recommendation letter for the camera, and Nika hugged Professor Han while mouthing thank you to everyone except me. I left early and threw up behind the library. This life, I arrived with Ria and June, both of whom had promised to clap obnoxiously if my name was mispronounced. The hall looked the same. Polished floor, blue banners, faculty in dark suits, parents holding phones at chest height. But I was not the same object moving through it. When Dean Lin called my name, he did not say candidate under review or student involved in dormitory dispute. He said, Elise Varon, Dean's recommendation for ethical AI research, sponsor internship recipient, undergraduate journal nominee. The applause came warm and clean. I walked across the stage. Professor Han handed me the letter, and for a second, his formal expression softened. You built the staircase, he said quietly. Now climb it. I almost laughed. I almost cried. Instead, I shook his hand and turned toward the audience. In the back row, half hidden near the doors, stood Nika. She clapped once, then again, then steadily. Celia was not there. Mara definitely was not there. I did not need them to witness it. But seeing one of them understand enough to clap without asking for anything felt like a strange, small correction in the universe's handwriting. After the ceremony, I walked alone to dormitory 6B, not because I lived there anymore, but because the past sometimes needs a final address. The room was empty, for summer cleaning, for stripped mattresses, for bare desks. No perfume, no laundry, no alaros, no vispere d'accusations. Sunlight fell through the blinds in bright rectangular patches. My old lower bunk looked smaller than I remembered. I stood in the doorway and let the memories come without fighting them. Mara snoring through alarms, Celia crying pretty tears, Nika asking for one more favor, me hunched over borrowed problems at 2 a.m., me shaking them awake, me running, me failing, me dying in a life where everyone called my devotion instability. Then I placed the memory beside the new one. Me lying still at 6:02, the alarm screaming, my eyes open, my body finally refusing the role it had been assigned. People might say the revenge happened when they missed the exam, or when the dean froze their recommendations, or when my presentation exposed the exact structure of their theft. They would be wrong. The revenge happened in the dark before sunrise, in the half-inch between my hand and the light switch, when I chose not to turn myself into a rescue system one more time. Everything after that was paperwork. On the last night before I left for the sponsor internship, my new alarm rang at 5:45 for an early train. I woke immediately. For a second, still half inside sleep, I expected chaos. Mara shouting, Celia asking where her earrings were, Nika crying because she could not find her ID. Instead, there was only my small room, my packed suitcase, my cleared desk, and the quiet blue hour before morning. I turned off the alarm and smiled. Not dramatically. Not like a heroine at the end of a revenge drama with wind in her hair and enemies at her feet. Just smiled, tired and real, because I had somewhere to go and no one to drag behind me. As I zipped my suitcase, my phone buzzed with an email from the undergraduate journal. Congratulations. Your article has been accepted pending minor revisions. I read the sentence once, then again, then laughed softly into the empty room. Outside, the campus was waking. Somewhere, alarms were ringing. Some people would answer them. Some would not. That was no longer my moral crisis. I picked up my bag, checked my own documents, locked my own door, and walked into the morning that belonged to me.